Hello, and welcome to another episode of Carolyn Crafts. Today we'll be working on spinning a bit more. So in our last spinning video, we talked about the park and draft method. So we'll continue on with that a little bit to start off. So something you may find as you're spinning is that you either need to attach a new piece of roving or your thread or the yarn that you're making splits for whatever reason. In some cases that may be because you don't have enough twist. So the twist is what allows the fibers to hold together real tight. Otherwise they start to pull apart. You can also have too much twist. This is about right. It springs together pretty easily, but it's not really fighting me too much. And you kind of gain a feel for that just by practicing, honestly. So if I have a lot of twist in it, when you're parking and drafting, you put twist in the yarn and then you reduce it by adding more yarn so the twist is more spread out. But see, this is very kinked up. It really wants to go back on itself. We don't want quite that much in our final product. I'm going to release a little bit here for what I'm doing. If your yarn is broken, you'll want to make sure the end of your yarn doesn't have a bunch of twists in it. And then fluff it up. And sometimes this takes a couple tries, and then you'll want to fluff the end of your roving as well. And the larger the area of overlap, the better the two pieces will hold together. So I may actually kind of unspin the end of this here a little bit and just sort of pull the fibers apart a little. Okay, then overlap the two. Oops. And then if you kind of hold at the ends of the overlap and then kind of pull them against each other a little, that'll help the little scales in the wool fibers connect to each other. And we'll see if that worked. I may have had a little too thin of a piece there, but we'll see. And then give it a good amount of spin. You probably are still using the park and draft method at this point, but there, okay. And then give it a gentle tug just to see if it held. If it doesn't hold, then you'll need to maybe even break a little piece off so you get a nice thicker spot that you can fluff up in order to reattach it. The thinner the yarn, the more difficult it's going to be to reattach, but it just takes practice. So once you have mastered the park and draft method, you're going to want to learn how to spin how to draft while the spindle is free falling. So the principle is very similar to the park and draft method. You're pulling roving thinner and then allowing twist to go up into that thinner area. So what you do is you spin your spindle and then pinch at the top where your completed yarn is, and then while the spindle is spinning, you would pull and release, just like as if you were drafting, parking and drafting. So it's kind of the same thing, but you're combining the two motions into one. So I'll give you a full demonstration there. So spin, pinch, pull, release, up, pinch, pull, release, up. And I find it helpful to almost travel my hand up the yarn rather than making two discrete pinching spots. But basically the main goal there is to not let the twist run all the way up into your rovings, and you have to kind of untwist the roving so that you can continue drafting. But spin, and then I'm pinching, pulling, allowing it to go up. And there's some different techniques. You can use this as the one I do, but there's quite a lot. Now when you're doing this, you'll want to keep an eye on your spindle, because what can happen is that you're spinning, you're paying attention to your drafting up here, and then the spindle starts to go the wrong way, and eventually it'll untwist all your yarn, or the yarn that's up above that you're working on, and then the spindle will fall and the yarn will split. So if that happens, then you have to make another join. So fluff up the ends, overlap them, kind of pull them gently to rub them against each other so that they catch, and then spin it again. And if it doesn't quite hold, you may end up having to discard a small piece, so sometimes it'll split, and the section of roving that you've spun is really hard to get to fluff up. You can always detach some of it and then just start afresh with a new piece of roving. So sometimes I do that. So I'll give you a little more, another example of joining. So let's say you're getting to the end of your roving, you want a new piece, got a nice fluffy bit. The more fluff and overlap you've got, the easier it's going to be. So fluff that up, and then I'm going to fluff this section as well. Overlap. Okay, oops. Overlap. And see, I've put it on a really big fluffy spot because since I was just dealing with the end of my roving rather than a split, I had lots and lots of fluff. And so that gives me a lot to kind of stretch and pull the two against each other. And that helps you make a stronger join. And then give it a spin. And then keep drafting while it's spinning. And then keep an eye on your spindle. As it slows, you can give it another spin. And then that's another thing that can happen. If you're not paying enough attention, your roving can get caught up in your new yarn, and then you'll end up with some kind of messy spots. So if that happens, unroll it, just kind of remove the excess fluff, and then to prevent that, you can throw your roving over your shoulder. Right. So I think that's about it for the basics of making a single ply yarn. Later you'll remove it from the spindle, and typically people will then essentially twist it back onto itself to make a double ply or even a triple ply yarn, and there's multiple methods of doing that as well. But that's the basics. Thanks for watching.